So today we're going to talk about a cliche of between a rock and a hard place. Have you heard that cliche before, right? What does it mean? Thanks, David. All right, a little deeper. You're awesome. It's nice to have you back from vacation. All right, a little bit more. All right, you're in a really bad spot. You're stuck. Because I should have written a sermon this week instead of depending on you. All right. So we had the idea that you're stuck in which there's no good options. In which there's not a point A, there's not A or B. There's nothing good. Now, we're going to take this story literally this week. You'll love this. It's going to be great. Okay. We're following the story of Jacob. His brother Esau is chasing him, wants to kill him. That's a hard place, right? It's a bad spot to be. See where this is going? And Jacob, when he went to sleep at night, pulled up a rock for his pillow. He's between a rock and a hard place. Okay. Now, are you feeling how awful that was? How awful the abuse of that cliche was? Are you groaning inwardly? I hope you are. Because that gives us a sense of how we feel when we're in this sort of spot. Of God, really? Again? This sort of stuff? Again? There's got to be something better than this. So hold that feeling as we think about the story of Jacob. And I want to give a little background to see where Jacob is going. Jacob, as we've been thinking about him, he is a con man. He is lousy. And tricking his brother. Not exactly the guy that you look for like a role model. Something that I find interesting about Jacob is I usually think of him as young, of making mistakes when he was young. No offense to people who are younger than me, but not mature like me. Most likely, he is 77 at this time. If you follow the pattern of things, now granted, lifespans were longer, but still, he's seen 77 years. He should know better than this. And then the other piece of this story is his field trip. He's got to go 500 miles to get to Laban's shack. And he's gone about 50 miles at this point. So he's about 2 days into his journey of 500 miles. So this is where Jacob is at when we get to today's story. Genesis chapter 28, verses 10 through 15. It's on page 20 in the Pew Bibles. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Jacob is running from God. He's running from his brother and people that are angry with him. But in many ways, he's running from God. He'd kind of taken God's stuff in his own hands. If God had said, the older will serve the younger, Jacob kind of took that prophecy to a little bit of a rush. And now he is running from his situation and from God. But the clear picture we end up with is that God is pursuing Jacob. So keep that in the back of our minds as we think through this story of how God is continuing to pursue Jacob. He's in a really bad spot. I want to think about his condition. First, he's lost. Jacob grew up rich. Servants, plenty of money. Now he is alone. He's not even living in a city, a city. He's out in the boonies. on his way, in many ways, lost. I want to think about times in our lives in which we end up lost. When there's a death of someone, feel lost. When there's a disease or illness of some kind, we feel lost. Whether it's ourselves or a loved one, what's going on? We're lost with sense of what direction to go. Disasters, whether it's a natural disaster, financial disaster, any other things, we feel lost. One more, lost. Now I'm going with D's. You get the flow of this? D, D, D. Anybody have a guess of my next D? Doom. Doom? That's kind of cool. Yeah. Just think of the PowerPoint slide you could have gotten with that one. Yeah. Bing would have been awesome. All right, so any other ideas on D? Oh, this is... Dandruff. Yes. Doesn't that come naturally? Do you get this? All right. So dandruff. I end up with dandruff in transition of seasons. You know, you go from spring to fall. Or no, spring doesn't go into fall. But however that works. When there's a transition of seasons, I end up with dandruff, right? In life, we end up with transitions that do not go smoothly. It might be a transition of moving. It might be a transition of moving from junior high to senior high, or moving from high school to college, or moving from college to job, or moving, all sorts of transitions. We end up sometimes not going very smoothly and feeling lost. Of God, what direction do you have for me now? I think that's the sort of place Jacob is feeling. So his first condition is lost. Another one is that he's impoverished. I touched on this, but just going back to Genesis 26, and Isaac sowed in that land and reaped in the same year 100-fold. The Lord blessed him, and the man became rich and gained more and more until he became very wealthy. He had possessions of flocks and herds and many servants, so that the Philistines envied him. Jacob's family is loaded, and now he's got nothing. He had stolen, he thought, the right to have all of this stuff. And he's lost it, at least for now. Impoverished. Last one is Jacob is disappointed. Jacob thought that he was pulling off this greatest thing of birthright and then the blessing, and he's left shamed. Think about how Esau has told everyone what's happened. The rumor mill is going really good. If there's lots of servants and there's lots of people in this camp, just think of how this word spreads. Yeah, Jacob, the slimy loser, has tricked old dad into giving the blessing. Just think about how that would pass, and now the pressure of being an outcast. I'm assuming all of us at some point in our lives have felt somewhat on the outs. That's Jacob now. All right. Now, if you've been paying close attention, and you've been thinking in terms of acrostics, we have lost, impoverished, and disappointed. Lid. Oh, you get that? L-I-D, lid? I'm just assuming it's hot today, and you're just like, this is so good, I'm just going to take it in. Trying. All right. Think about this of a lid in which we cannot fix our own problems. We end up with the law of the lid. You can only rise above situations so much with your own strength. Jacob is lost, he's impoverished, and he's disappointed. Three things that we can all feel at different times in life in which we cannot rise above it because that lid is holding us down. The only hope for us is God removing the lid. And God does that in the promise that he has here for Jacob. He offers Jacob, rather than being lost, he offers him his presence. In verse 15, God said, I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. We hear that promise over and over again, whether it's at the end of Matthew or other places. God will not leave us. my question is, do we live like that? Do we live like God's presence is really with us? As I was thinking about that, I was trying to think of some sort of illustration, and I know most of you won't believe it, but at one point in my life, I had an ounce of coolness, and then my kids sucked it away from me, all right? So that's where I'm at now. So when we go places, I do things to embarrass them, to get back at them. And so when we go to rest areas, I walk into things that are obvious. I walk into trash cans, I walk into doors, because it's fun, because they try to hide from me, they're like, we're not associated with him at all. It's great fun. I suggest that you try that. It's tremendous fun. And you don't have to buy them food, because they just want to leave. They're not hungry, they just want to leave. Now think about that in terms of, it's ridiculous to walk into a door. You know it's there, it's to be used, but how often do we treat God that way? We'll gather together for church and we'll say, I know God's presence is with me. And then we'll go home, and during the week, how many times will we pray emphatically to God? Will we spend time in which we can't get out of bed until we've talked to God and had a communication with Him, really sharing where we're at? How often is it that we walk into the door and say, well, I knew that I was there? Jacob, that's where he's at. God has promised him his presence, and Jacob misses it. Let's go on. Lifting the lid of impoverished to land. In verse 13, God promises Jacob, you know what? That blessing will happen. You will receive this land. Same is true for us. You and I are offered an eternal inheritance of God's kingdom. How often is it that we lose sight of that? I appreciate Brandon's testimony this morning, in which how easy it is to get focused on those problems till we don't take that step of, I know God's nudging me to do this, but I don't know. I have these fears, these immediate fears, rather than looking long-term, rather than seeing God's eternal plan. One more thing that happens here is that God offers more than Jacob's disappointment. He reminds Jacob of the blessing to Abraham. It happened in Genesis chapter 12, in which God says, you will be a blessing to others. You will be a blessing to the world. What an opportunity for Jacob. His life isn't just about himself. It's not just about his circumstances. It's about bringing God's plan of redemption to the world. Let's read a few more verses to get Jacob's underwhelming response. Verse 16, when Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me, will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and of all that you gave me, I will give you a tenth. Notice how Jacob twists God's blessing. God has promised his presence, and now it's switched, and Jacob says, you're in this one spot. This is the gateway to heaven. This is where God is, in this one spot. Nothing more. And do we treat God that way, of somehow only when we gather together is God in a spot, and not throughout my daily life? God is only in this spot when I pray before I eat, but not in the conversation I have with the people around me while I eat. God is with me when I pray before I go to sleep at night, but not with me when I'm watching TV or on the internet at night. How often is it we put God in a box rather than seeing his presence with us all the time? The next piece that Jacob twists is he takes the blessing of this future blessing of the land to Jacob says, bless me now. God, I've got a grocery list for you. I want food, I want clothes, and return me on my timetable. And that rolls into the next one. Jacob is looking to be blessed himself. how ridiculous is it for Jacob to set up the parameters of how God should bless him? I was thinking about this. This is, if I own stock in Apple, I don't know what the minimum number you can own. Say I own 100 shares of an Apple. And I write them a letter, and I say, you need to send me one of your newfangled watch thingies. I've read about it, but I'm not a techie, I don't know. Some watch thingy that they just came out with. I need one of those, and I'm a shareholder, so send it to me. And I want it scratch and sniffed bacon, because all things should smell like bacon, and scratch and sniff is cool. And I demand that. I tell them, you are ridiculous if you don't do that for me, because I own 100 shares of Apple. It'd be laughable, right? I mean, they wouldn't even open the letter, unless I saw it was from Carl Green. But they would laugh it off. This is what Jacob is doing. He's telling God, oh, God, okay, now that you've met with me, let me tell you how you should meet on my terms. Now, it's funny when we think about it in terms of Jacob, but think about our own prayers. God, this is what you should do, and then I will do this. Or, God, I will know that you're here when this happens. Rather than saying, God, I know who you are. I receive what you give me. A very big difference. But Jacob is twisting it, and something that we do also. An interesting thing, though, God is not done pursuing Jacob. This picture that happens here of the ladder or the staircase, however you want to kind of picture that, is the idea that God is looking to dwell with his people. And God is telling Jacob, I am pursuing you. And we see time and time again, God considers pursuing Jacob, who, to be honest, is a pretty good loser. His life does not exactly turn great directions right away. But God continues pursuing him. If you remember back to the call to worship this morning, it was very similar what Jesus said. That deal with talking with Nathanael. And he, Jesus, said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man. That's a clear picture, very similar to Jacob's ladder. The idea that God is pursuing us by way of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the way that God is coming to earth to pursue us. His life, death, and resurrection is how he's pursuing us. God is not done pursuing you. I don't think God's pursuit of us is just a matter of salvation, which is critical. But God is pursuing us for a deeper walk with him. God is pursuing us for so much more. But our theology holds us back. We get stuck with Jacob's Snuggie theology. Does anyone have a Snuggie? No? You don't watch enough. Yeah. So it's like one of those, it's like a backward bathrobe, right? You wear it and it's like a blankie to keep you warm. That's what Jacob's looking for. I want a God who's going to keep me warm and snuggly, but that I can keep doing what I want to do. I don't want my life changed by this. I just want to be warm and fuzzy. That's very different from the idea of surrender, of surrendering to God and saying, you know what, God, I'm done running away from you. I'm going to start running towards you. I want to run at this one more angle. Our relationship grows deeper. We talk with him all the time. God isn't looking for us to just be inside a doorway. He's looking for us to truly spend time with him. Just going to flip up the last slide. Think about what's keeping you from a deeper relationship with God. What's keeping you from that banquet room? Is it time? Priorities? Maybe there's a sin. Maybe it's just pride of having to admit that I need to surrender to God. Or maybe there's fear. Maybe it's just procrastination of, I know it's something I need to do, but I'm really happy just inside the door. God is not calling us to just go inside the door in our relationship with him. God is looking for us to know him. And the promise to Jacob is a promise for us.